Namaste, my name is Sanat Kumar. Welcome back to the Manana podcast. Manana is a Sanskrit word that means reflection or contemplation. In this podcast, I'll be sharing my deep, insightful reflections for you to contemplate and hence live a life of fulfillment. I hope you find great value in today's episode. Live a little? There's little truth to it. Or in the right words, it's a part of the truth. I'll explain to you a concept called planes of reality. Imagine planes that are forming this reality. If the topmost layer is the absolute truth, the bottom layers are the truths of the transactional reality. And sometimes we are confused due to this. We do not consider the idea that all truths are not of the same significance. Or, in other words, we don't dive and think enough to know the deeper truth. So, this episode is about one of the examples of such confusions. Okay, let's get into it. Live a little. If you have to say to yourself, live a little, then what that means is that you're not living otherwise, right? You're not living a fulfilled life. You're existing far from life, or you're just existing. So the phrase live a little is only relevant to them, to one who is not living life, right? In other words, it makes sense to take a break and live a life if you're not already living it. What that statement is actually trying to say is, at least for once in a while, get off the rat race. However, that applies only to the majority of the population who is actually in the rat race, that is pursuing meaningless, doing meaningless. So it does not apply to you who is living a life that's filled with meaning, a balanced life, a life of service to humanity, a life of fulfillment, a life where you're enjoying what you do. You don't need to take time from thriving to live a little. Does that make sense? Even you're thriving at your life. Why do you want to live a little? Does that make sense? If you're already living a fulfilled life, you don't even need to stop to think about living a little. Because you are thriving. That is, you are living your life to the fullest. However, the phrase live a little is not to be confused with active recovery or rest period. Rest and recovery is very essential. Active recovery is required for thriving. Hence, it is part of life. A peak performer knows what he's doing. He also knows recovery is part of peak performance. So he ensures he gets enough active, intentional recovery period regularly. He's resting and recovering so as to live more and thrive to the fullest of life he is. So rest or recovery is definitely a necessity. However, it must be to thrive, to live to the fullest and not to live a little. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned the idea of the existence of planes of realities or truths. I hope by now, after listening to this episode, you're able to notice that live a little belongs to lower plane of reality. So live a little is undoubtedly true and good advice for one in the rat race. But we must see deeper. Can we possibly try to abandon the race itself? Can we make our lives a journey where the journey itself is the reward and not what may come after? Can we stop postponing living? Can we live and thrive now rather than simply existing in the anticipation to live in the future? What I mean to convey through this episode is that start living in such a way that you don't have to ask yourself to live a little. By the way, if you are interested to know more about living a fulfilled life, you may find helpful to read my book, The Flower of Fulfillment. I hope you received excellent value in today's episode. To know more, head over to sanatkumarnabi.com, and if you haven't already, check out my book, The Flower of Fulfillment. Thank you for listening, and I wish you have a great day.